Hey there, welcome to the Empowerment Equation podcast. I'm Rowan Embry.
And I'm Lyra Vanguard.
On this podcast, we'll have insightful conversations that can empower all of us as we tap into our inner wisdom and connect with our higher selves.
We've got some awesome guests lined up who will share their stories about moments that really help to awaken and empower them. And we're sure their stories will empower you as well. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Today, we have come together to discuss something called spiritual bypassing. It's been on my mind quite a bit because I've seen it kind of happening around me. And I did a little research and I found out the phrase was coined by John Welwood, an American psychotherapist and Buddhist teacher. There's many ways in which we can spiritual bypass. There's good vibes only, whereas we just suppress our negative emotions. There's also what the Christians do is, I would argue, is complete spiritual bypassing with the whole accepting Christ as your Savior, because many people don't embody Christ consciousness, which we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, and that is becoming like the Christ, embodying his attributes. They're not really Christ-like. They just decide, oh, I know he died on the cross, therefore I'm saved, so I'm just going to give it to Jesus, give it to God, and not worry about it. This is also spiritual bypassing. But those are pretty kind of blanket examples. So I wanted to get together with Rowan today and discuss the ways in which we've noticed that we've done spiritual bypassing ourselves. And before we get started on our talk, I wanted to mention that before we gathered today, we both intentionally watched a video by a woman named Christina Lopes, the Heart Alchemist, on YouTube. And the video was called "What is Spiritual Bypassing and How to Stop Doing It?" So, would you like to elaborate, Rowan?
Well, it triggered a couple of things for me. I think the easier one to explain that's more recent is the death of my father. So in that video, Christina talks about feeling your complete humanness, the entire spectrum of emotions, and how no emotions are bad or good. They just are. And you should feel them all because you're human. But my father died a year ago, last June, and I did not grieve. I just bypassed the whole grieving process because I've been on this path a short time when you consider my true age on this earth. And at that time, a year ago, I thought, why should I be sad? Because I feel like I know where my dad is, where he's going to be, and how he's about to figure everything out. He's going to know it all now. And I'm not sad about that. I'm glad for him. I was not happy that he passed on, but I was happy to know that now he has all the answers and he's part of that oneness we all become, when we go back. And so I did not grieve, and I didn't know how to handle the people around me grieving his loss. And so I separated myself from it quite a bit. And then what broke me open was when I went to a friend's wedding, a very close friend, this past weekend. And I was part of the wedding party. And I've never been one to understand happy tears at weddings, but I've been changing, over the course of the year. And I did cry happy tears when I saw her come down the aisle and her husband was crying, and then I cried again during their first dance. But mostly what broke me open was the fact that her father was there. He walked her down the aisle. He had not been part of her life for a long time, and he came back into her life at a time when her mother, had chosen to step out of her life and was not at the wedding. And then they had a father-daughter dance. He gave a speech. He said he was proud of her. And I just cried through all of that. And I thought for a moment, what is wrong with me? Like, why is this having such a deep effect on me? And in the moment, I tried to assess it. And I thought, well, it's because I'm thinking about my own father and how he wasn't part of my life for so long. And then he was from the time I was 18 until he died last year. So my whole adult life, he has been there. But he won't ever be there again. I can't talk to him. I can't dance with him if I get married again. He won't ever be there to give me away. And I can't see him anymore. And it hit me that I never grieved. And I know why I didn't grieve. And so that was one of the things that it triggered for me.
When all that happened, and it was hard for me to see you spiritual bypassing because I thought, okay, she's just trying to get through it. This is how she wants to deal with it. These are her emotions. And if she wants to be stoic about it, or I don't know, you just listen as a friend. You just take whatever your friend's telling you as how they're feeling at the moment. So yeah, it was hard for me to even recognize that within you. So it's interesting that you were able to hear her video and feel that. And I already had felt it, at the wedding. So I knew that was a very special time for you too, but that's amazing. I knew you said you were teary, but even as your best friend, I still didn't put two and two together. I just, like you said, thought it was because you were so happy for your friend.
Yeah, I thought so too at the time, but well, let me rephrase. What happened was when I was in Kundalini yoga teacher training, and on Sunday morning we listened to this song called A Call, AKAAL, because our instructor was grieving. It was the 25th anniversary of her brother's death, and other people were crying with her and maybe about some of their own losses. And so we took a time out from training and we just all listened to this song so that everybody could cry if they needed to. It was a safe space to do this in. And I thought, well, what am I going to cry about? And then the song as it played, it talks about mothers and fathers and different things. And that is honestly when I put two and two together. And I realized that all of those things at the wedding were triggering the tears. And yes, I was happy, so happy for my friend, but also I didn't realize it then, but I realized it during this song that I was crying because of the loss of my father. It is when I finally started to grieve him.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's songs. I feel like music, because we've talked about this before. We're vibrational beings. Everything is in motion. Nothing is actually still or, solid. It just has the appearance by the rate of its vibration. So that's wonderful that the song helped you as well and triggered something. There's so much just living life, being open to every little thing that comes along in life, whether it's a song on the radio or something a friend says or something you notice in nature, is all there for us to trigger these things so we can accept it and accept the healing that comes along with it and the sorrow.
Absolutely. You don't ever expect to be triggered, but when it happens, I've learned to just go with it and work through it now and let myself cry if I need to cry. And I'm not going to be embarrassed and worried what other people think about me being too emotional or not having my shit together because I need to get it out. It's part of the processing and the alchemizing of all of those human emotions we're supposed to be feeling.
Absolutely. I love that in the video that we just watched too with Christina Lopes. She talks about that. The tips she gave about not doing the spiritual bypassing, to notice when you're getting into spiritual bypassing and to help you get out of it, was one, work with the triggers, like you just said, and also embrace your humanity. And also realizing that there's no good or bad emotions, which are all things you just covered. Like, I'm being too emotional, and then having to embrace the humanity and that we do have loss. And there's so many ways in which we can spiritual bypass. And it's just the balancing act of it. Because yes, you want to stay in a positive mindset. And yes, you don't want to focus on the negative and watch all the crazy news. But right, we can use it as an excuse, I guess, sometimes to leave stuff unhealed and unrecognized. And another great point that she made in the video is when we do that, because I was thinking about this prior to even watching the video, the fact of leaving something unhealed. It's very much like if we had a physical injury, if you leave it unattended to, most likely it's going to become infected. And we've all had something infected, at some point. Either it's topical on the skin or it's an internal infection, but we know that hurts after a while. It just gets worse and worse, and you feel weaker and you get more fevers because it's your body like just screaming for some assistance. It's like, help me. you know, it's getting infected. So, some of the things that we bypass on us because it is painful, but then left unattended long enough. I mean, you're either able to bypass long enough where you think you're all good and then you get a trigger like you did, with the wedding and the song, or you keep ignoring the triggers. I've talked to clients about this too that are trying to manifest or trying to change something in their life, but there's deep shadow work they haven't done that just keeps bringing it up. And they're like, well, every time I meditate or every time I focus on the positive, it just gets worse. And they said, worse. It's the same thing as the body crying out from an actual physical wound. It's like, because there's something here that's not healed. Give me the proper attention. Acknowledge it.
Right. And we can't keep shoving that down, or it's going to create illness or dis-ease in our bodies.
Exactly. Dis-ease. I'm so glad we had a chat about this today and we're continuing to talk about it because it's like, I think nothing comes across our path, whether a download or stuff we're watching on videos or something that somebody mentions that you don't need. Think about watching patterns and noticing things. And so, like I said, I'd already gotten from my own guides that there was a topic around the spiritual bypassing. And then it's starting to come up around us, just like with you. So I'm glad we didn't even know we needed to talk about this. We're like, okay, it'd be a good topic. And then you went to the wedding and everything unfurled.
But when I was listening to her, I also recalled the spiritual bypassing I did with my mother. The part she talks about where, I can't be around that negativity. Well, that's exactly how I felt about my birth mother. And I think you probably recall a time when you talked me down, because I did not want to call her and talk to her. It had become, there was so much avoidance around that I just felt like I could live my life without ever speaking to her again. I could go along my spiritual path and do my thing and just never speak to this woman who gave birth to me. And you were like, well, that's not true. And I remember crying and telling you I would literally rather do anything else in the world, live in my car, not eat for a week, just like anything else but call her. Like, I don't want to do it. And I can't hear what she has to say. I don't want to hear the negativity. I don't want to hear her complete lack of interest in anything except for complaining about her health, my brother, the whole world. And you were like, you got to do it. And I really had to suck it up and like calm myself down with some deep breathing and put on my big girl panties and like call her. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I hadn't talked to her in so long because I was not only afraid of the negativity touching me, but let me maybe explain why I was so afraid of the negativity, because she's been negative my whole life. It's just, so this shouldn't be like, there had to be something right that pushed me over the edge with like, I can't deal with it anymore, right? The negativity. And that thing was that I went for a biofield tuning, and this woman also happened to be a shaman. And while she was working on me and we were going through some of the ancestral things I had been holding on to, she got down to my gut and she was on my right side. And there was this place where a couple of different Reiki healers had told me, I feel like you need to do some shadow work. There's something over here on this side. Well, the shaman starts pulling this dark energy out of me. She's got a big selenite wand and she's telling me to visualize it coming out and dissipating, and she's doing this whole thing and she's telling me she's going to bury it in the backyard in the dirt when she's done. And I'm like, oh my God. And she was like, that's been with you since you were 5 years old. And I'm like, oh my God. I was so terrified because when I was 5 years old, I was living in a house I thought was haunted. I would see things and hear things and feel things, and it terrified me as a small child. My mom did as well, but it followed us to other houses. And I didn't realize till much later that it was my mother drawing the darkness to her. It was my mother drawing those energies because of her negativity and her outlook on life, drawing those things to her. And in turn, one of them was drawn to me, I guess, as a small child and had attached itself. And I can tell you that I was on some health kick at the time and I'd been weighing myself regularly. And the next day, I was physically 2 pounds lighter, and the 2 pounds never came back. So I felt like that darkness that was pulled out took up 2 pounds of physical space in my guts, right? And the shaman told me, your mom needs more love than the average bear, but you don't have to talk to her to love her. You can love her from afar. Put a golden bubble of light around yourself. Focus on filling that space back up. You don't want anything to move back in. You don't have to see your mom to love her. You don't have to talk to her to love her. You could just love her from afar. So that's what I felt like I was doing, because I do love her, but I kept her at arm's length. She lives in another state. We don't even talk on the phone once a month. And I felt like that's enough for me. But I really put off talking to her for months at a time, because I didn't want to let what I perceived to be that negativity that drew the darkness to her and to me in the first place to come back in at all after I had gotten it cleaned out. So I made that phone call, and I determined that I would do something I've never done before. And I told her kind of what I believe now. I explained to her that though I was baptized in the Baptist church as a child, that I didn't feel the things you're supposed to feel when you feel close to God, not the way I do now. She sounded rather horrified at that acknowledgement. And then she asked me, but you still believe in Jesus, right? And I said, I believe that Jesus was a man, and I believe that he worked miracles because he was connected to source and he knew what he was capable of and the power that's within us all. And she said, well, I hope that you still believe in hell and the devil, because that's real. And I said, I think hell is what we create here for ourselves on earth. I stopped short of saying that's what you do. You've created the hell that you constantly live in. But, you can only say so much when you're doing truth telling with mom, right? But it was a very cathartic conversation because she listened to me and she didn't poo poo anything I said to her. And then, she was obviously disturbed, and she's afraid for my soul. She believes I'm probably going to hell because I'm not saved anymore in her mind. But I told her, don't worry about me. I am going to be fine. I know exactly where I'm going and what's going to happen, and it's all going to be okay. I could hear the grimacing on the other end of the phone, but she ever since then has been quite different with me. She touches base on text. She just reaches out sometimes to see how I'm doing. And when we do have phone calls, she almost seems to be downright positive for her. It's like she's changing. And I don't know if she's doing that as a result of me explaining my fears to her, or if it's because through healing some of that ancestral stuff and just being forthright with her, it's brought about some change in her. But whatever it is, that wound is healing.
I would absolutely say it's both. I think it's you voicing how you really felt, being honest, and her wanting the connection with you as well, because she kept reaching out to you. She wanted to connect with you. So I think she'd just gotten to a point too where she was willing to hear more truth. It was just the right timing, because I do believe that everything is in divine timing. And I also believe that just by changing ourselves, we change others for sure. That definitely happens. We've talked about this in scripting. I didn't go into a lot of detail then, but I had a relationship that had scripted on, and the whole thing did like a whole turnaround. It's just, and it's amazing. And it's honestly because I went within and held some of my own trauma of neediness and needing approval and needing to be fawned over, you know what I mean? To feel like I really had value. I kind of was a people pleaser. So when I got into this relationship and wasn't fawned over and wasn't, held this regard that I'm used to being held at in order to feel loved, and I felt like pushed away, shoved aside, but it gave me an opportunity to go within and really love myself. And amazingly, when I started loving myself properly, and because that person pushed me out, they came back around and the relationship healed itself. And it's like I didn't have to have any direct conversations or like, you're doing this to me, or you're doing that to me, or you're not doing this for me. It just kind of magically got better. And then the next time we were in contact, it just got a little better and a little better. And there was just more comprehension and understanding without, it was crazy. But the only work I had done was on me. So I do believe that working on yourself can improve your relationships without ever you having to actually, say too much to the other person.
That's beautiful. I think that maybe we've been going about it all wrong, right? Because most of the time, people look at the other person and are like, I'm going to need you to do X, Y, Z, and I'll do A, B, C, and then we'll get along better.
Hmm.
Instead of just saying, I will work on me and you do you, and whatever happens, happens.
Right. Now, see, we also have to become very self aware and keen, though, about like who we truly are. Because I would say that I have a client in particular who is trying to go about fixing their relationship like I did mine, and it's not working. And the reason is because it's not one size fits all. It's because my core wound in that was being a people pleaser and not loving myself. So the way I had to go love myself was to be shoved out so I'd have time to be with me and get to know me. This particular client is also dealing with a lack of self-love, but unfortunately, they've taken and this is one of the ways in which they're spiritual bypassing, and I've pointed it out, but they're not really ready to fully accept it yet. It's that thing where if you remember in the video we were watching, she said, and everybody, I encourage you to go watch this video with Christina Lopes. It's absolutely, I think, essential if you want to keep ascending and keep manifesting and keep on your path because so many of us don't know we do the spiritual bypassing all the time. One of the thing was projecting your triggers onto others, finding exterior reason why you can't ascend by saying, oh, it's this person's fault or that, or they're doing this. But there comes a time when you can use that projection, you can take it upon yourself falsely. And it comes when we don't speak up for ourselves because there are times when we're being gaslit or triggered, or we're dealing with a narcissist and they're attacking us, and we go within and we're like, oh, it's not their behavior. It must be a projection of what's going on in me. So I'll keep silent. So not voicing, not drawing boundaries is also spiritual bypassing because you're like, okay, I don't want to draw a boundary because that's mean. That feels mean. That feels like I'm telling them that they're treating me this way. I'll just go within further. Again, that's an avoidance thing. It's kind of tricky. You have to really be honest with you with what you're really dealing with because even within the bypassing, there's ways to bypass.
Yeah, I never considered that not drawing boundaries, but I know a lot of people have trouble drawing boundaries and saying no. It's got to be really difficult when you're not used to it. And it's someone close to you, like a partner or a parent or whoever it is, to stand up and draw the boundary and say no.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so funny with this client that I'm speaking about. It's like we're the same trauma, but there's two different modalities of healing where she needs to speak up and draw a clear boundary. I had already drawn all kinds of boundaries with my partnerships. I was like, you will speak to me this way. You will treat me that way. I am this to you. I am the only one. I am, so I had all these expectations of what love was. So I had very clear boundaries. But in doing that, I like I said, didn't go within and didn't really do the self-love. I thought I had self-love because I had all these boundaries. It's like, I will be respected. I will be, those are my boundaries. You and I both, we're understanding boundaries, but where I had to do was go in and do that thing where it's like, well, maybe it's not them, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm protecting myself with all these boundaries because I've got some healing to do. And that was very true. What I found out when I went within, and I was attracting all kinds of bad things in relationships, like being cheated on and all different kinds of things. Even though I didn't want it and I had boundaries around it, it's like I was kind of a magnet to it because I didn't have that self-love. So anyway, we all got to just take the time and do the shadow work and work with the triggers and don't run from them. And if you need to find somebody, a coach or counselor, or even a friend to talk to, that's helpful too. Just don't avoid it.
What it sounds like I heard you also say, without saying it, is that you were attracting more of what you didn't want because you still had to do the work.
Yep, exactly. You can say like you're manifesting what you don't want because you fear it. Same thing. You're attracting what you don't want because you don't want it because your emotions around it are so strong. But those emotions also come from shadow and from trauma. The reason it's so emotional is because we're hurt there or traumatized or we have darkness around it. It needs to be brought to the surface. And that's one thing I've been hearing my guides say. It has to be revealed to be healed. You have to know and you have to acknowledge what's festering, what's traumatizing, what's the thing that you're avoiding, the thing that doesn't feel good.
Right. And some of those things are easier to surface than others. Like years ago, I acknowledged that I tried to control others because I grew up with a controlling father. Not the father whose death occurred, but like the stepfather who raised me. I had to come to terms with that about myself. So then when I truly embraced the nature of what I was doing, I just stopped trying to control other people and I just let them do what they would do. And if it wasn't in alignment with what I wanted, then I left the relationship.
Yeah, that's hard, and that's interesting that you say that. I suffered the same thing. I've not wanted to be controlled so much in my life that I did find myself controlling of others. And that's what was happening in those relationships as well. Because I would get into relationships where I knew I had the upper hand, and I wasn't vulnerable. But then I got into this relationship, the last one I was talking about, and it's like, I felt very vulnerable. I couldn't bend them to my will. I couldn't threaten them. The boundaries didn't work anymore. It's like, it was crazy. I was like, oh, but I wasn't willing to let it go either. Whereas in the past, I don't know. I was very dogmatic and hanging on to something that hurt for some reason. But now I know it was my higher self going, there's a lesson here. There's medicine here. There's light at the end of this tunnel. Just hang on. Just keep doing the work. I didn't even know what work I was doing at the time. I was just getting frustrated. But when I got so frustrated that I went to be with myself is when started getting revealed.
That's amazing because if put in the same situation as you, I think I would have walked away and it would have been like, well, that's not going to work out. We're clearly not on the same path. We're not in alignment. I'm going to go. I don't think I would have seen the medicine in it like you talked about, but I'm glad that you did because now that you're on the other side of it, I know that astrologically this was meant to be, that this was supposed to happen so that you could do this deep work.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. That's why I would say, really, everybody should, to make all of this a bit easier, as much as you can, spend time with yourself. I had to have somebody physically ignore me to go spend time with myself. And I really thought I loved myself. But like, we do need to spend time with ourselves, getting to know our own birth charts. All of this is actually very important information. I think that there's no more important work you're going to do here on this planet than to expand and to know yourself and to become really conscious and self-aware. So the work, the trauma and all that stuff, the shadow gets healed the more that you peel back the layers of your own soul and your own revealing of the God within you, the closer you get to source, essentially, which is within.
Absolutely. 100%. That's beautiful.
This was a great talk. Rowan's going to put a couple of links down here of this video that we chatted about. Yeah, guys, I would just encourage you to just find some people, like you said, if you don't have anybody within the family or friends that you can chat with these things and be vulnerable with, I would definitely seek out coaching as well. Just somebody who can hold some space, just a different perspective. Because half the time, just talking it out with another person will help you find those aha moments. It's just like, oh, yeah, in saying that, I've just now realized there's the thing.
It's true. We have had a lot of aha moments talking things out with each other. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yes. And I'm so glad we have this space as well to come together to have these conversations so we can have these aha moments even here live. I know we've done that a couple of times and yeah, it's just amazing. So on that note too, I'm looking forward to some of the guests we have lined up. They're pretty amazing.
We've got 3 amazing ones coming up pretty soon.
Oh, thanks for joining us, guys. Until next time.
Bye-bye.